Welcome to another CEM, Christian Education Ministry training time. Glad that you could be with us today. Today we're going to be asking the question, how safe is your church? We're going to be looking at several questions that were put together by a recent report on church safety. And good time for you maybe to ask yourselves these questions yourself, and how safe is your church? Helping us today, we have two gentlemen, Reverend Andy Putnam and also Steve Kern, who is an elder at Devonshire Road ARP Church, men who I consider to have done their homework in this area. And we look forward to how God is going to use this training time through these men. Go over. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good to be with you this afternoon.
If you guys could kind of introduce yourself for our audience, I'd appreciate it, and who you are and where you are as church and church safety issues as far as what are you doing, a little bit of how you got into this.
Go ahead, Andy.
I was going to go age before beauty, Steve. I'm Andrew Putnam, senior pastor at Church Saftey ARP Church in York County near Rock Hill, South Carolina. I've got a bit of a law enforcement background also, and we have law enforcement officers and EMTs in the church. So we started this process numerous years ago, actually, and we have a security team in place, a security plan that we've actually had reviewed by the Sheriff's Department, which they've since copied to everybody else. And it goes into we have a lot of little details we can talk about that are part and pieces of that. As well as you mentioned earlier when we were talking, the first aid kit and such. We have a rather prominent one. We have a gymnasium. So we have commonly people getting hurt and stuff, during basketball games, that sort of thing. So we have a large wall-mounted emergency kit there and with everything in it. It's also updated by some of our folks. We try and keep that current as well.
I'm Steve Kern. I'm the ruling elder at Devonshire Road Presbyterian in Greer, South Carolina. And our church has been involved for a number of years in putting together our program and in upgrading and making sure that it's current. Our deacons right now are looking at what we have already put together and where we are with our action plans and where we are with our training, looking to make improvements in what we have been doing through the years. But like Andy, our church has taken a proactive position that things can happen, and we need to try to do the best we can to be prepared for the eventualities of all sorts of different situations, from medical emergencies to natural disasters to active shooter situations. So we've had some involvement. I certainly don't claim to be an expert, but myself and a number of our elders have been involved with local law enforcement and FEMA and other agencies in helping to develop our program, and we just continue to try to improve on it so that if something happens, we're more able to act in an appropriate fashion than those who are not prepared at all.
Growing up and being in Boy Scouts for a long time, I always remember one of the main things is you be prepared, because you never know what's going to happen, but you need to at least be prepared. And so I think that's one of the things that we as churches and as leaders need to realize. Like we said, you never know what's going to happen, but at least you've thought about it, and you're moving forward. You have a plan. First question that we want to ask is, does your church have an active safety and security team that is responsible for evaluating and addressing safety concerns, threats, and/or incidents? Safety team, how do you come about getting a safety team together?
Well, I can tell you we have a security team at Terza for the security side. Our safety team is going to be primarily paramedics. We have about 4 full-on paramedics in our church and a couple retired. And so we turn to them for the safety side as far as health and emergency scenarios go.
That's awesome. So y'all have two teams. You have one for security.
Yeah, the
and one
security
for
team is far more active and purposeful. It's within the diaconate. We have some law enforcement officers and former law enforcement officers. We have some that are able to carry concealed weapons. And that is something, just aside there, state laws are different per state regarding churches and concealed weapon.
Right.
South Carolina's law, the governing body of the church has to approve of the person to carry on property. We have a blanket approval for all CWP carriers to be allowed on our campus. We post that. Attorney General's office says that's sufficient to meet the need of that. But we always have at least one, typically more CWP holders within the security team active each Sunday. And what we'll have there, just kind of a jump off, is we have security cameras throughout the property. We have positioned the doors so that they can only be, the only way into the church once service starts is through one set of doors. They're all push bar exits, meeting the fire code and all that, which is an expensive thing to do, by the way, but it is worth the trouble there. Our nursery is in building, and we have one of the security team is assigned to float, so they'll go and check in the nursery and just around the property a bit. And with the security cameras, we have positioned secondary locations where we have monitors, so that at the front door, there's a 50-inch TV at the front door area, front narthex area, where the diaconate security team member can watch all entrances of the property at all times during the service, prior to the service, that sort of thing. And with the idea they would see what's coming.
Right.
And then we have a plan in place going from there.
How often do your teams meet? Is it monthly or do they meet quarterly? I'm just curious if someone's going, man, we need to get a team together.
They don't have a formal meeting thing there every Sunday, though. They know make sure the security cameras feed are right, check the doors. Now, we have changed everything because of the pandemic. We moved into our Family Life Center. We're fortunate to have a gymnasium, so we can move in there and be social distanced and all that. So when we did that, we developed a plan for that facility for entrances and exits, so that one entrance in once service starts, key locations of where they're at, and we move the security feed, one of the security feed TVs over to that location, so they've got that active right there as you come in.
Yeah.
And we're not having a nursery, which is one of the factors. We have security cameras, and we're just adding some more this week. But we have security cameras around so that every entrance and exit of the property is seen, parking lot is seen on both sides, as well as the nursery.
Every church's situation is going to be a little bit different according to the size of the structure, the number of structures, the location of the parking lots, and all of that. We have cameras on the inside that are being monitored from our sound room on Sunday mornings, and that's the only time they're being monitored during primary worship service. But we also have our teams of folks who are at least 2, sometimes 3, who are actively watching the parking area on the outside, and they're making circuits on the outside to make sure people realize we have a presence out there. And on Sunday mornings at 10 minutes after the service starts, all of our doors are locked except one entry door to the back of the sanctuary, and it's being watched actually physically by armed personnel. And then the other doors that are locked, they're all glass doors with panic bars on, so that you can get easy access to the outside should you need to evacuate for any reason. But they're also being monitored throughout the worship service by at least one deacon or elder, and usually that person is also licensed to carry firearms. So our intent is, as much as possible, to seal off the building except for limited access, and to also be able to maintain visual observation of everything going on outside the building on the property, and in hopes that if something were to develop, it can be be held outside and not allowed to get into the building.
Exactly. And one of the things, as I was listening to you guys speak, and I was thinking this goes, a lot of people are saying, well, I'm a small church. You know, we all we have to do is this or do something simple. I said, even if you have a small church, you still need a team in place and a plan.
Yeah.
And I think that's
one thing there on the security camera side of that. A lot of your security camera systems can be remotely viewed through internet access with password and all of that. So we have all of our team also has those. So if they're somewhere away from one of the monitors, you can pull it up on your smartphone.
Yeah, exactly.
And we also ran a feed into the secretary's office during the week when the secretary may be the only person there a lot of times or that sort of thing, and they're locked in the building. They have that access in front of their desk so they can see what's going on around the property as well. And we've had 5 or 6 occasions, just had one a week or two back, where during the week some theft has taken place on our property, maybe not ours. The lawn care folks had somebody drive up and steal a blower and a weed eater 2 weeks back, and we're able to pull up the feed and hand it over to the detectives, and they go, here, that's who it is, you know.
And I was just looking this morning online at some of the cameras and things, the systems, and they've come down a whole lot. So I know some people are looking at, we can have cameras, they just cost a ton, but they've really come down lately, and like,
yeah,
a lot easier.
It's not a terribly expensive proposition. The biggest thing there I could recommend is make sure when you get the system, your main hub is going to be essentially a DVR. It's going to be recording. Go ahead and spend the money to get one that has the largest storage space, because you may find that something happened 3 weeks ago. Before we had our security camera system, we had a trailer stolen. We only used the trailer 2 times, 3 times a year. The Boy Scouts used it a couple times. This was several years back. We have no idea what month it was even stolen in, you know, because of where it was parked. We've since, corrected that with cameras and all that. I'm just saying that for churches, go ahead and spend the money and get the recording capability that, bump up your hard drive so that you can see what happened sometime back.
Exactly.
I second that.
Yeah, very good. That's an excellent point. The next question, basically, you guys have really covered already, but I think it's excellent. Does your church lock its main entrance doors during any of its weekly worship gatherings?
Yeah, like Steve was saying, the push bar thing is the big deal. Now, that you'll be surprised and shocked at the expense to put those on. It really will, but it's worth the money. One of the issues we thought about in the process years back when we were dealing with this wasn't simply active shooter situations, but domestic disturbance situations. A parent coming in to get a child out of a nursery in the middle of a domestic dispute or something like that. We wanted to be able to control who has access to the nursery building, to the children's areas during services and during Sunday school.
So explain a little bit for those who may not know about the push bar. Push bar enables you to you can get out, but you can't get in.
Right. As the name implies, you push out. The key is you want to make sure that what you're doing is in compliance with your fire department. We had the fire chief come out and tell us what would work, what wouldn't work, those sort of things, because they're understandably being careful that you're not locking somebody into the building somehow.
Exactly. That's good. Excellent. Next question we had was, does your church lock its secondary entrance, its side doors, back doors during any of its weekly worship gatherings? And then we can
once services start, we have one way in once they start.
Which is the way we are on Sunday mornings, but we also have looked at the situation where we have Wednesday night services, or we were before the COVID-19, in which case a few minutes after that meal or service started, we locked all doors to the building.
And you have push bars on the doors.
Because everyone was congregated in one section of the building, and then someone, if they wanted access, would have to come to one of the doors and knock or ring the bell in order to get our attention on the inside to go to see what was going on at that particular door. This stops people who might just pull in, there's church going on here, maybe I can get $50. And they just walk in the door, and the next thing you know, you've got people in the building, you don't even know who they are or what their intent is. which is which can be a pretty scary situation, depending on who meets that person first. So we just lock all of the exterior doors during those times when there's women's meetings going on, when there's Bible studies going on. After everyone that we think is going to get there for that particular event is there, we go ahead and lock all the doors, and they've got to get our attention in order to get inside.
Well, that does bring up a good point.
We do something very similar, except our Family Life Center, many of the doors do not have handles on the outside. They're exit doors only anyway, so that lends to some security for us there.
I was going to mention one thing. I think that, Steve, after when y'all were talking, I was thinking it also is good to have, you know, somebody's got to be training everybody that uses that church. If the youth group is using it, you know, or the men's group, you have to kind of be able to do that as well, that let everyone know the plan.
Backing up on something there with security cameras, one of the things we did was we included not only the outside entrances and all that, the major congregating areas like our Family Life Center. We also have the kitchen covered by camera as well. And like I said, we're adding 6 more cameras here in the next 2 weeks, just for those little areas in between. We cover your playground as well, things like that.
Right. Looking here again, let's see. Does your church designate members to serve as safety monitors during any of your weekly gatherings?
Well, we have greeters, but primarily the security team folks.
And it's primarily with us. A certain number of our deacons and a certain number of our elders are basically going to be on site for any event in the life of the church. And we have a number of both deacons and elders who are maybe not tasked, but we're all tasked in a sense to be alert and aware of who's coming, who's going, who's pulling into the parking lot, who's leaving the parking lot. Just what I would call total situational awareness. We're a small church. We only have 75 members. Everyone, all of our deacons and elders know the members of the church. And when we have visitors and so forth, we make an attempt to establish contact with them right at the door or right before they come in the door. We'll open the door for them and we'll welcome them, or we'll sort of eyeball them to see what their situation is. So being a small church, we don't designate per se on a meeting by meeting or week by week basis any designated person, but there's always, well, when we get into the use of firearms, we have 6 designated people within our congregation who have written letters of approval from the session saying that they're authorized to carry firearms at any time on the premises as long as their concealed weapons permit is still active, is still current, and that they're still practicing and taking training. So it's sort of informal with us being a smaller church, and I know a lot of our churches are smaller churches. They're not the size of Andy's. So you can develop your own program to fit your size of church and your particular situation. Nothing has to be done in one particular way as long as you cover all the different thought processes and preparation for what can happen, and just have people being aware. Again, I go back to that situational awareness.
If I can jump off what he just said, which is very accurate, one of the things we did was we went to anybody we know that has a CWP license and had a conversation with them about this, as well as the security team. But one of the things, talking about situational awareness, one of the things we were concerned about in that is, well, not to be too morbid, but if you have someone come into a church with a gun or something like that, you don't want everyone that has a concealed weapons permit to pull out a gun and start shooting, because they need to be situationally aware of what's behind the person they're shooting at. And so we actually walked ourselves through that. If someone comes into this area, this door, this place, what are the shooting alleys? What are the shooting lanes? What are we going to be hollering out to the congregation, you know, et cetera, so that there's not chaos? And in our case, we came to the conclusion that one of the best things was use the center aisle and tell everyone down into the outside. Just keep repeating that down into the outside. Get them out of the line of fire of stuff. And so we went to a number of the folks, anyone we're aware of that at CWP, and told them, you know, if something happens, we have people in place, so please don't immediately start shooting from the choir loft or something like that. You know.
Good, great point. Excellent. The next question we have, and we're actually going to get into some questions on active shooters, but the question I have is, does your church have a security alarm system? And
No, we do not.
I'm just curious. I think they asked that, and I know one church I just found out was, I think they still got their sound system stolen last week.
I'm sorry, Brent. We do not have a security system. The best security systems seem to be the ones that are constantly monitored, but if there's no one on site for the monitoring company to contact, then you've got a false sense of security, I think, about your system. Yeah, police, but usually the police in this area, the county sheriff's deputies and so forth, if the monitoring company notifies them that they're getting an alarm for a break-in somewhere, it still may be 20 minutes before they get there.
Yeah.
And
we kind of came to the same conclusion with ours. It wasn't worth, you know, it wouldn't be worth the money because of that. Now, we do have some of our cameras set up to alert on motion.
Yeah.
And they will send an alert out to my phone and, you know, the security team folks, just to, if there's a motion, and they're in places where there would not be motion unless someone's not where they're supposed to be, you know, late at night or something.
That's good. That's almost better than a security alarm system anyway. Next question is, does your church have operating security cameras? And of course, I think we've already answered that question, and that was a good question. Next one was one that I found quite interesting, was, does your church have a first aid kit available for use on site? And here's the question: if you do have a first aid kit, does everyone know where it is?
Yeah, ours is on the wall. It's about the size of a suitcase. It's quite large, and it's on the wall, eye level, in the kitchen, centrally located. And everyone knows that, and you can't miss it when you go in the kitchen, because, as I said, we have that situation with, you know, when we were not under the pandemic, we had basketball season going on, and every Saturday you had somebody needed something. So, and the big thing about that isn't just to have it, is to have it stocked.
Yes.
You know, keep it freshly stocked. Just because you put it up there on top of the refrigerator 10 years ago, those Band-Aids are all stuck together now.
Yeah.
Now we have our primary entrance is right off of the parking lot, which comes into a rather large open area. We call it the gathering place, which is also under normal circumstances is a coffee bar, refreshment center, and a self-checkout library. And the bottom cabinet right next to the entrance into the sanctuary, there's a big red cross sign on that cabinet door on the outside of it saying, there's a first aid kit inside. Andy makes a great point. Stocking it or having someone assigned to make sure that it is continuously stocked is important, because if you go to the first aid kit to get something, if it's been depleted, it's no better off than if you didn't have a first aid kit to begin with.
And one of the things we found was, you probably have somebody in your church who has a medical background, a nurse, a paramedic, EMT, whatever, who may not be involved in anything else. And they would love to take this on as their project, to make sure that, you know, we always have that and the AED and, you know, all those things up to speed and everything. They would love that.
Yeah. Yeah, we recently had a situation where I was doing some outside work at the church, and a family came to the church to use the playground. Mother, 3 kids with bicycles. They came from nearby. They got into the playground, and one of the kids got stung by a wasp. Well, I knew exactly where the first aid kit was, but the question in my mind was, is there an appropriate ointment or something to put on this kid's bee bite or wasp sting? And thankfully it was right there in the top of the box. It had not been used by somebody else at work or some other day. So I was very thankful that we were able to have that, and for that mother to be able to apply that ointment and subside the pain. If it's not well stocked, it's not very worthwhile.
Yeah, I love what Andrew said too. There's people in the church that would love to have that as a ministry.
Yeah.
So I want to, encourage you
And
guys.
we have a secondary first aid kit. All of our kids and toddlers, baby nursery and all is on one wing of the church. And because there's usually just a limited number of parents down there supervising those kids during worship service, just enough to provide adequate supervision, we also have a secondary kit down there for small things like cuts and bruises and kids playing with each other and falling or tripping over a toy or something. So we have a secondary kit right there in one of the nursery rooms, so that they don't have to leave the supervision of the kids in order to go to where the main kit is.
Yeah, we have the same sort of setup in the nurseries.
Excellent. Now, we mentioned AEDs just a minute ago. Does your church have a automated external defibrillator available for use on site?
We do not. We've looked into it, and each time we look into it, the requirements for training and other things have been prohibitive. I believe they've changed some of that now, and we've been talking about putting one in.
Yeah, we do have one. We've probably had ours for about 8 years. So let me give you some pointers if you're considering getting an AED. If you'll look around, there are some that have been rehabbed, and you can get those with the same warranty as a new unit at maybe half the price or a little bit more than half the price of a brand new unit. We found one. I found one through an online web search from a company that Philips and several other companies manufacture these units. And I'll tell you, the leads that hook up to an AED when you first open it up to apply it to a person, if you go the AED route, you're going to need a set of leads for adults, and you're going to need a set of leads for youth or babies also. And those have a what's the word I'm trying to think of? Anyhow, they have a lifespan. They expire at a certain point in time, and they need to be replaced, as well as the battery to the main unit. Now, the main unit battery, I believe, if I remember correctly, will last 4, 5, 6 years. But about a year ago, I had to replace the battery in ours. Those are not expensive either. I mean, not inexpensive either.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about going the AED route, realize the total expense is going to be the cost of a unit, either new or refurbished. It's going to be the cost of the leads, the package with the leads for adult and children, and the fact that the batteries and those leads are going to need to be replaced every now and then. We have one. Our deacons are tasked. We have what we call a duty deacon on Sunday, who takes care of unlocking doors, getting lights on, and so forth. Our unit is mounted in the wall in a metal case with a glass front on it, and you can bend over and look at that unit, and if it's working normally, it'll have a green flashing light indicating that it's ready for use. Gotcha. You know that the battery is strong and it's ready. So you can open the door, pull it out, grab it, and take it to wherever you need to in the church. And I recommend, our church is getting to be an older church. If you have folks who are getting into their 60s or 70s like I am, or into your 80s, The possibilities of needing to use that AED are increased with the increasing age of your membership. So I think all of those things would be things that any church should consider if they don't already have one.
Steve, what was about training and using those?
The training only takes about 5 minutes.
Okay.
The thing is, as it says, automatic.
Okay.
We include, because we've had Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Trail Life USA, other organizations. We've had classical conversations, students, homeschool students using our facilities. We have required that all of the adults who are working with youth and all of our leaders, our elders and our deacons, are required to take training, which includes first aid every 2 years, CPR, and AED training. And the AED part of it really only takes 5 minutes or less, just as a familiarization with how to open the case, how to pull the leads out, where to apply the leads, and then follow the instructions of the AED itself. It will tell you whether to administer the voltage shock or not.
Okay.
Okay.
And so it's pretty simple. So basically, for our folks, it's just ends up being like a 3-minute review for the folks who have been through the training every other year for like 6 or 8 years now.
And y'all do that every other year?
Yeah.
Training is okay.
Yeah, every 2 years we have. You can go through the Red Cross. The Red Cross will provide instructors, and you can set up a schedule, and they'll come and provide all this training together as one unit at your location. But there are also contract instructors who are certified by the Red Cross who will come to you. And we've used an organization out of Northeast Georgia that comes to South Carolina on a pretty frequent basis, providing our training. They bring the dummies that you need for CPR, for youth, baby, grown-up CPR. And we give them a call every other year, and we set up a class usually on a Saturday in the fall. Starts about 9 or so and is usually over by 1 or 2. And for those who've had it, it's a good review. For those who've never had it, of course, there's a little bit more of a learning curve when you start practicing CPR. But anyhow, all of that, we include the AED. We pull our own unit out, take it down, and the instructor opens it up and goes through it, says, this is what you do. You just follow the lead of the AED itself, and it's almost foolproof.
All right, excellent. Awesome. The next question we have, and I know we talked about this, but does your church have a formal plan in place in the event of an active shooter?
Yes.
So you guys have covered that. And the next one was, has your church received any formal active shooter training? Tell me a little bit about the training. And you guys, I know you've talked about, you've got the people in line, you've got them approved. Andrew, what you were talking about as far as even training them when they're in there, they need to know what to tell what people are in there with an active shooter. Talk to me a little bit about how the training process goes.
Well, if you don't have someone who can do the training, your sheriff's department or city police department typically is going to have someone now trained to do this training. Okay, so you can reach out to your sheriff's department or city police department. Most states now have that, so it's not a real and they will come do it mostly for no charge. We are fortunate in that we have some of those folks within our church even. And so, and some background in that, but most of what you're wanting to do is coordinate what's going to be, anybody who shoots, as I do, knows, a lot of it's muscle memory. You get used to what you got to do. And so you don't want them to be wondering what they're supposed to do. You want them to know this is the plan. This is where we go. This is where these things happen. Something Steve mentioned earlier that I think we probably ought to cover a bit, which isn't on our list even, though, is inclement weather and that sort of thing. We've had that conversation more recently when we've had tornado scares and that kind of thing, making sure everybody knows where they're supposed to be in those kind of situations too.
And that's excellent. You know, I remember growing up in schools, they taught you what to do if a tornado were to come, or you knew, but you don't get that at church many times.
Maybe in another session or something on the same general area, there are all kinds of things that a church, I think, you'd be smart, going back to the old Boy Scout be prepared motto. Does your church sit along a railroad track, and that railroad track hauls freight trains with hazardous materials on it? And does it have, do you have the possibility of a train derailment, or do you have the possibility of a petrochemical plant explosion or fire nearby? It could impact you. Depends on how close you are. You might need to be a triage facility for folks who have been evacuated from a disaster site, an industrial disaster site, or from a natural disaster. Andy just mentioned tornadoes. We don't get many in this area, but we do get some severe thunderstorms that don't have tornadoes. But you can have flash flooding. You can have all sorts of things that can happen. You can have major power outages in the wintertime when it's cold. Your church might actually be needed to be a shelter-in-place facility, a triage facility, an overnight stay facility, or just a meal preparation and feeding facility. So there are any number of things that that your church can think about, and with a little preparation, have a little bit of organization so that you know who to call and who to gather and how long it's going to take you to gather people in order to be able to handle those things that might happen in your location, wherever that is.
That's a real good point. We're a disaster relief center in case of hurricane and that sort of thing for overnight stay in our gymnasium. Red Cross organizes it. But you do need to know who's the contact person, what's that going to entail, who's got to open up. And we just ran into something just, let's see, we all went into lockdown in March, let's say January. A local nursery, daycare nursery, reached out to us. We're their fallback position as a pickup point if they ever have an active shooter situation. And we're registered with the sheriff's department, so we needed to know what that entailed, what was expected, where people would go in the middle of that chaos. Not that it would happen at our location, but it's happened somewhere else, and the sheriff's department is going to transport everybody to our location for pickup. Children is kind of not necessarily triage, but sort of the central point for that sort of thing.
I can tell you, Steve, when you were talking about having a plan, and I was at a church and the hurricane was coming through on the coast, and our church wasn't on the coast. We were 2 hours from the coast, but all the roads were just packed with people coming in through our little city, and all the places to stay were filled up, and so my phone kept ringing. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we had no plan in place, so we just had to pull something together. And that's what I was wishing. I wish we had somewhat of a plan.
Yeah. An imperfect plan is better than no plan at all.
Right.
Can I give you a little, can I give a little advertisement here?
Please, sir.
This is a guide that you can download right off the computer from FEMA. Andy looks like he's shaking his head that he's familiar with it. It is called The Guide for Developing High Quality Emergency Operations Plans for Houses of Worship. You can get it right off the web. It's a PDF. It will give you everything that you need in order to put together a plan, whether it's for active shooter, whether it's for a major natural disaster, whether it's industrial accident, how to go about looking at your facility, your capabilities with personnel, your location in proximity and context to other things in the area. And it is, I think, it is an outstanding document. It's been in existence since 2013. It's worth church leaders, I believe, reviewing that document and then asking themselves, how can we improve the plans that we already have, or how can we put a plan in place to give us a head start in case something occurs?
We'll have a link. We'll have that link listed beside this as well.
Something you said earlier, Brent, that kind of piggybacks off what Steve was talking about. About 70% of the ARP church are small churches, under 100 members, 50 to 75 members. And a lot of them are rural, but they've got to realize they may be the only location around there for folks to gather at in times of these disasters and such. And so even though they may think they're a small church, what can they do? They may be the only thing that can be done. They may have the only parking lot. They may have the only building. They may have the only phone working, whatever. And so it would be crucial for a lot of our churches to develop this, because they may be in the spot where they're the ones, you mentioned train disaster. I hadn't thought of that one, but that's a good one. And a lot of our rural churches, should be an issue for them to consider.
Now, I mean, your parking lot could be a staging area for power company during a major power outage after a hurricane in your area.
Yeah.
They need a place to park their vehicles, to refuel their vehicles, to stage and plan their deployments. You may be the ideal location for them to use you as a staging facility, and you might be able to open up your kitchen and prepare meals. You might be able to put cots out. We have a fellowship hall. I know Andy's got a big facility where you can put out cots, and these men can get 2 or 3 hours worth of sleep between call outs. There are all kinds of things that we don't think about on a daily basis because they don't happen frequently. But when they do happen, there's a need there that our churches can fill.
And, we didn't talk about this previously in a sense, but Steve just kind of hit on it. It's not just being there. There's a ministry component to this. We can show the love of Christ to these folks who may not have anyone ministering to them in the disaster situation, even the frontline responders and those folks, like you mentioned, providing a place for food and that sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing you want to have a bit of preparedness ahead of time. Who do we call? Who's going to handle this? What can we do, kind of thing. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are great in the middle of a, blackout and everything else in a bowl of soup, that sort of thinking can be just the difference between being ready, and being prepared.
Excellent. The next couple of questions, I think we've already addressed. You guys have done a great job on. Does your church have a written policy concerning weapons on church property? And I think you guys both of you have those policies. And I think Andy, you even said that. I'm trying to think that what you said that really popped into my mind was the fact that not only do you guys know exactly who has them, but you've already had all that training also from the sheriff's office.
And again, every state has a different policy about CWPs and churches. So be aware of what your state policy is on that.
Yeah, there's state law, and then your church may also have its own individual policy.
Right.
Like Andy and I both have churches in South Carolina, and South Carolina law says that before you can carry a firearm, concealed carry with a concealed weapons permit inside the church, you have to have the express permission of the church leadership.
Yeah. We
do it by a leader. North Carolina has open carry. Somebody can walk into a church with a sidearm on in church service. It could be a guest, and they could walk in with a sidearm showing. It does not have to be concealed. So every state's law is different. Their approach to security from a church in North Carolina might be totally different from South Carolina or Georgia. Georgia also requires church leadership authorization to carry a firearm on their premises. So Andy makes an excellent point, and everyone who you want to authorize to be a part of your security team is going to have to follow whatever that state law is in New Jersey, New York, Florida, wherever. We know we have churches all over the place, but they need to know state law as well as what, in some cases, there are local jurisdictional laws. Not all states are like South Carolina.
There might be even some federal requirements depending on where you're at. So just be aware of those things.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do one more question for today because some of the other questions I think we might address later. But the one question is, does your church have a line item in your budget to address safety and security needs? First of all, I'm sure both of y'all do. What would be an average number maybe for a small church? How much should you set aside for that? Any ideas?
Actually, we don't have that as a line item. We take it on a need basis.
Okay.
We this year had a congregational meeting. We have a building fund, and we have in our bylaws the building fund cannot be tapped without congregational approval. So when we did that, one of the items was increasing number of security cameras that we had and such like that. You're going to spend, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. You're probably going to spend $1,000 to $2,000 initially to get what you need. And that's going to be someone installing. They're very simple to install, but running the cable is the hard part. And the temptation is to go to wireless, but a lot of times those are going to fail when you want them. But a wire, you've got to run wire, physically run a wire from where that camera is at the other end of the building to where the DVR is going to be. And in our case, we have two buildings, but they're connected by a walkthrough, so we have it running through the walkthrough as well. And that's actually the biggest part of the expense and setup. A lot of the stuff you can purchase online otherwise.
Excellent.
We don't really have it as a line item, but we have several funds, discretionary funds that the deacons can use, or that we have a separate building repair fund. We can use those funds as needed in order to make sure that we have what we want. We have done some surveys and so forth. I noted Andy said earlier they were adding some more cameras. We're looking at adding more cameras to more locations because we don't have cameras monitoring the exterior of the building or parking lots right now. And that's one of the areas where we would like to see an improvement, so we didn't have to have somebody walking the perimeter of the parking area. We could monitor from inside in all weather and all situations. So we're going out into the marketplace and getting people to give us quotes and examining the quality of what they're proposing and the cost to us, and we're weighing cost versus benefit in order to make those decisions, which we're in the process of doing now.
One thing there when it comes to that selection of cameras, and this is from our experience of why we're adding more cameras, we covered all the entrances and exits of the building, all the entrances and exits of the parking lot. What we didn't really anticipate was there's certain areas that while you can see them on the camera, it might as well be on the moon, you know, as far as quality of what you're getting image-wise. You're not able to see a license plate or something like that. And so we're adding cameras into what we would call blind spot areas, not necessarily, you know, entrances or exits, but areas that fill in the gap. The other thing we found, and your church may find this, was we would love to have a camera that's facing the road. That is an advantage for not only us, if a car pulls out and we know which way they go, but also law enforcement. We were at an intersection, so we've had a number of times where law enforcement has come by and gone, this date, this time, can we look at your cameras? Do you have any idea if this person went by your church? Something like that. And there's a lot of those type of things. But again, cover your outside entrances and exits so you've got advance notice. And we don't hide this fact. We make clear everybody knows that we have these cameras for the most part. And as you come into the narthex, into the entrance lobby there at Terza, one of the monitors is right there that shows you all the feed of the entrances. So the deacon security team members watching that during the whole service. So everybody understands we've got that going on.
Which helps also with a lot of things. It helps with even your child protection.
Yes.
You know, that's huge. You know that your kids are being watched. It helps visitors to know that, hey, you know, this church does take care, and I feel more secure here, which a lot of visitors are looking for nowadays as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions you guys may? I know I kind of hit some of those as far as you guys have done an amazing job on
I see the 14th question. You didn't want to get into that today. Is that what
I'm gonna get in that late.
Okay.
What I thought I'd do is I'd cover these first sections, and then I'm gonna get with you guys. We're gonna hit those questions, if you don't mind, a bit later.
Yeah, one thing about security cameras and stuff, when you have those, it's hard to, I wouldn't say sell it, but that might be the way to put it, to convince people the need, because you don't wake up in the morning and find, you know, robbers laying out in the yard like they were zapped by a bug zapper. You don't know. But once you get them in, you're going to be surprised how many people are driving through your parking lot, how many people are near your building at night. You know, it is surprising to you how many people walk their dog around your building at 5 in the morning, and you know, things you had no idea were going on around your property when you get that in place.
Excellent. Steve, you got anything else that you think of, my friend?
Well, I was just thinking, we just had a 2-car accident at the traffic light in the intersection right out in front of the church last Sunday morning, 15-20 minutes before worship service started, which disrupted traffic. Thankfully, there were no injuries, but one of our deacons ended up taking 2 families to their respective residences because both vehicles had to be towed off. Now, we didn't have a question about who was right or wrong. I think the officer figured that one out pretty quickly, but like Andy says, having those outside cameras and knowing what's going on when there's no one from the church there it's like peace. You can rest more peacefully at night knowing that those cameras are keeping an eye on and will record for you and tell you things, not necessarily that were bad, but keep you abreast of what's going on, what activities there are in the vicinity around your property, around your church. So I mean, cameras are they're not the all-in-one answer to everything, but in today's world, they have proven themselves time and time again to be an advantage in lots of situations as a backup.
All right, super. So, guys, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, I do encourage you. I'm going to put Andy's and Steve's email on there, and I'm sure they'd be glad to help you out.
Sure.
And, any questions that you guys would have. And the second part we're going to do later on, but we're going to we'll do a little bit of child protection. And so look forward to seeing that. And I want to bring a children's leader in on that as well. And because that's even a whole nother child layer of protection that I think a lot of times we miss as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And we appreciate you and all your time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.